If you'd like to learn more about poetry, you can reach us at... Psych, we just kidding. Good night, y'all.
Well, all of us aren't. And welcome to... Hi everyone, welcome back to Hearts and Minds Special Club channel. For those of you who are new here, my name is Advash Pillai. I hold a short and freelance writer. Please make sure to leave a comment down below after you download the video, share with your friends, don't forget to like. For information on this or another episode, go to my website heartsandone.wordpress.com. There are additional resources, more reading material, episode-related content, and link to a book if you're interested. On today's episode, we're going to talk about Thomas Stearns Elliot. Thomas Stearns Elliot was almost as renowned a literary critic as he was a poet. From 1916 through 1921, he contributed approximately 100 reviews and articles to various periodicals. This early criticism was produced at night under the pressure of supplementing his meager salary, first as a teacher, then as a bank clerk, and not, as is sometimes suggested, under the compulsion to rewrite literary history. A product of his critical intelligence and superb training in philosophy and literature, his essays, however, hastily written and for whatever motive, had an immediate impact. His ideas quickly solidified into doctrine and became, with the early essays of I.A. Richards, the basis of the new criticism, one of the most influential schools of literary study in the 20th century. Through half a century of critical writing, Eliot's concerns remained more or less constant. His position regarding those concerns, however, was frequently refined, revised, or occasionally reversed. Beginning in the late 1920s, Eliot's literary criticism was supplemented by religious and social criticism. In these writings, such as The Idea of a Christian Society, 1939, he can be seen as a deeply involved and thoughtful Christian poet in the process of making sense of the world between the two world wars. These writings, sympathetically read, suggest the dilemma of the serious observer of Western culture in the 1930s, and rightly understood, they complement his poetry, plays, and literary journalism. Eliot is also an important figure in the 20th century drama. He was inclined from the first toward the theatre. His early poems are essentially dramatic, and many of his early essays and reviews are on drama and dramatists. By the mid-1920s, he was writing a play, Sweeney Agonistes, published in 1932, performed in 1933. In the 1930s, he wrote an ecclesiastical pageant, The Rock, performed and published in 1934, and two full-blown plays, Murder in the Cathedral, performed and published in 1935, and The Family Reunion, performed and published in 1939. And in the late 40s and the 50s, he devoted himself almost exclusively to plays, of which The Cocktail Party, performed in 1949, published in 1950, has been the most popular. His goal, realized only in part, was the revitalization of poetic drama in terms that would be consistent with the modern age. He experimented with language that, though close to contemporary speech, is essentially poetic and thus capable of spiritual, emotional, and intellectual resonance. His work has influenced several important 20th century playwrights, including W.H. Auden and Harold Pinter. Eliot also made significant contributions as an editor and publisher. From 1922 to 1939, he was the editor of a major intellectual journalism, The Criterion, and from 1925 to 1965, he was the editor and director in the publishing house of Faber and Faber. In both capacities, he worked behind the scenes to nurture the intellectual and spiritual life of his times. Eliot's genre. Eliot's poetry, often a study of the natural effects of ecocentrism. Modernity emphasizes the physical, psychological, and artistic importance of cultivating a close relationship with the natural world. The Wasteland is a pioneer lyric as Eliot is worried about the devastation left by the war. The Wasteland, available on heartsandone.wordpress.com. Here are 5 poems by Mr. Elliot that I'm reading for you. Marina. What place is this? What religion? What area of the world? What seas? What shores? What grey rocks and what islands? What water lapping the bow and scent of pine and the wood thrush singing through the fog? What images return, O my daughter? Those who sharpen the tooth of the dog, meaning death. Those who glitter with the glory of the hummingbird, meaning death. Those who sit in the stare of contempt, meaning death. Those who suffer the ecstasy of the animals, meaning death, are becoming unsubstantial, reducing by a wind, a breath of pine, and the wood song fog, by this grace dissolving in place. What is this place? Less clear and clearer, the pulse in the arm less strong and stronger, given or lent, more distant than stars and nearer than the eyes. Whispers and small laughters between leaves and hurrying feet, under sleep where all the waters meet. Bowsprit cracked with ice and paint cracked with heat. I made this, I have forgotten and remember. The rigging weak and the canvas rotten between one June and another September made this unknowing, half-conscious unknown my own. The cardboard strake leaks, the seams need cockling. This form, this face, this life, living to live in a world of time beyond me. Let me resign my life for this life, my speech for that unspoken. The awakened lips parted, the hope, the new ships, what seas, what shores, what grey-eyed islands towards my timbers, and wood thrush calling through the fog, my daughter. The Boston Evening Transcript. The readers of the Boston Evening Transcript sway in the wind like a field of ripe corn. When evening quickens and faintly in the streets, awakening the appetites of life in some, and to others bringing the Boston Evening Transcript, I mount the steps and ring the bell. Turning wearily as one would turn to nod goodbye to Rochefoucauld. If the street were time and he at the end of the street, and I say, Cousin Harriet, here's the Boston Evening Transcript. Journey of the Magi. A cold coming we had of it. Just the worst time of the year for a journey, and such a long journey. The ways deep and the weather sharp, the very dead of winter. And the camels galed, sore-footed, refractory, lying down in the melted snow. There were times we regretted the summer places on slopes and the terraces, and the silken girls bringing sherbet. Then the camel men cursing and grumbling and running away and wanting their liquor and women, and the night fires going out in the lack of shelters, and the cities hostile and the towns unfriendly, and the villages dirty and charging high prices. A hard time we had of it. At the end we preferred to travel all night, sleeping in snatches with the voices singing in our ears saying that this was all folly. Then at dawn we came down to a temporary valley, right below the snow lines, smelling of vegetation, with a running stream and a water mill beating the darkness, and 3 times on the low sky and an old white horse galloping away in the meadow. Then we came to a tavern with vine leaves over the lintel, 6 hands at an open door dicing for pieces of silver and feet kicking the empty wineskins. But there was no information, and so continued and arrived at evening, not a moment too soon. Finding the place, it was, you may say, satisfactory. All this was a long time ago, I remember, and I would do it again. But set down, this, were we led all that way for birth or death? There was a birth, certainly. We had evidence and no doubt. I had seen birth and death, but had thought they were different. This birth was hard and bitter agony for us, like death, our death. We returned to our places, these kingdoms, but no longer at ease here. In the old dispensation, with an alien people clutching their gods, I should be glad of another death. The hollow men. We are the hollow men, we are the stuffed men, leaning together, headpiece filled with straw. Alas, our dried voices when we whisper together are quiet and meaningless as wind in dry grass, or rats' feet over broken glass in our dry cellar. Shape without form, shade without color, paralyzed force, gesture without motion. Those who have crossed with direct eyes to death's other kingdom, remember us, if at all not as lost, violent souls, but only as the hollowed men, the stuffed men. Eyes I dare not meet in dreams, in death's dream kingdom, these do not appear. There the eyes are sunlight on a broken column. There is a tree swinging and voices are in the wind singing, more distant and more solemn than a fading star. Let me be no nearer in death's dream kingdom. Let me also wear such deliberate disguises, rat's coat, crow skin, crossed staves, in a field behaving as the wind behaves, no nearer. Not that final meeting in the Twilight Kingdom. Rannoch. Here the crow straves, here the patient stag breathes for the rifle. Between the soft moor and the soft sky, scarcely room to leap or soar. Substance crumbles in the thin air, moon cold or moon hot. The road winds in, listlessness of ancient war, languor of broken steel, clamor of confused wrong, apt in silence. Memory is strong beyond the bone, pride snapped, shadow of pride is long, in the long past, no concurrence of bone. And with that, we come to the end of the episode. I hope you enjoyed the journey we took today for a biography of Mr. Elliot, and it's a 25 poem script by myself and by Mr. Elliot. Head over to hearts91.wordpress.com, link in the description, all free of cost, of course. With each coming day, I hope you bring out a new change in your life. If the only thing consistent is inconsistency in the course of life. I wish you all the best. Remember tonight, signing off, Adarsh Pillai.